Welcome to yet another one in our series of video programs from San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I still can visualize you all sitting in your usual seats, so please think of yourself as being here with me. I miss you. For every time we make a mistake and we decide to start again, we light this chalice. For every time we are lonely and we let someone be our friend, we light this chalice. For every time we are disappointed and we choose to hope, we light this chalice. The opening words were written by Unitarian Universalist minister Wayne B. Arneson. We come together today online. He didn't write that. We come together today seeking a reality beyond our narrow selves that binds us to compassion, love, and understanding to other human beings and to the interdependent web of all living things. May our hearts and minds be opened to the power and the insight that weave together the scattered threads of our experience and help us remember the wholeness of which we are a part. I am going to continue to include our affirmation in the videos, so please join me. If you don't have a copy and don't have it memorized, let me know. We'll put it on the web. Maybe it's already on the web. So please join me. The doctrine of this church is love. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity and fellowship to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you are using your wondering minds, because I'm trying something different, aren't I? I'm not in my house. I'm outside in my backyard. And it's looking like it might rain. So I wonder if that might be a clue for what we're going to see in our Wonder Box today. Be thinking about that as I get it out. I'm shaking, not too much hint from shaking. Have you got an idea about what might be in here? Think about that. I'm gonna open it up. Yep, it's an umbrella. We've had those before in the Wonder Box. This is a nice big one, and I hope I don't need it too much, because what happens in this backyard when it rains a lot is that water comes down this cliff. John and Bruce have been in this backyard before looking for fossils on the cliff, but all those rocks make the water come down very quickly, and sometimes we've even had water in our garage. So I hope we don't get any flooding. That reminds me of a story that I have for you today that is about a flood. It's about two monkeys from Tanzania, and they are in a rainstorm, and the water starts to rise around the river. They see animals running away, getting up into higher land. We have deer in this yard, and they come through sometimes, and they would go to the top of the cliff to get out of the water. So animals like squirrels and skunks and possum, all the things we have in this yard, would go up high to get out of the water. And where these monkeys were, they climbed up into the trees. And they saw the water rising beneath them, and they looked down into that water and saw some animals struggling. They were swimming all around in this water, and they tried to help them get out. They needed to get out and be safe up in the trees with them and up in higher land like the rest of the animals. And they had a hard time catching them, but they finally did. The only problem was they were fish. And we know fish need water. They would have done well to just stay in the flood and go back down with the water when the flood was over. The story is kind of about the golden rule, where we want to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. And when we do think that way, we think all of us need the same things. I know in RE classes we've talked about the platinum rule, which is where we think about what someone else might need and then ask them what they might need and help them in that way. So Reverend Sandy is preaching about compassion, and I wonder how we can be sensitive about each other's needs right now. We've done an excellent job of caring for one another and reaching out to one another. We have a survey where we ask people to tell us what their needs are and what their resources are for helping each other. I hope that you can think about the platinum rule and remember about the monkeys and the fish as we go about helping each other during this difficult time with compassion. We're going to have RE service, RE hour together in a little bit, and we've got a scavenger hunt coming up, so I hope I will see you then, and I hope that you all have as good a week ahead as you possibly can. See you soon.
I invite you now into a time of meditation, and this will be a spoken meditation, but take deep breaths now and try to settle yourselves, and even close your eyes as long as you don't fall asleep, and let me guide you through a bit of a spoken meditation titled, When the World Makes No Sense, written by Unitarian Universalist minister Eric Walker Wickstrom. Great and gracious truth, known by so many names and by no name fully known, yet always you are life, capital L, and always you are love, capital L. Sometimes the world makes no sense to us. All that we've known has been tossed into the air, and with up and down in quotes, having changed places, we don't know where it all will land. We don't know where we will land because the world no longer makes any sense. What we thought was true is being called into question. What we knew to be safe no longer seems so. Spirit of life and love, it would be lovely if everything could easily go back to the way things were. Yet we know that the way things were wasn't as fair and just as we know the world should be. The comfort of some came at the cost of the discomfort of others. And that is not the world we dream of. That is not the beloved community we claim to strive for. Spirit of hope and courage, we seek the tenacity to live in this time of challenge and change, and not take the easier paths of running through or around it. Our faith is not an easy faith. This world is not an easy world. Our lives are not easy either. This place between birth and death is hard. Yet this is where living is. This is where growth is. This is where the holy is. And this is the only place true wholeness can be found. Today, in this place made sacred by the hopes and dreams of those who have come before, we would commit ourselves to the hard things. Commit ourselves to being instruments of change in a world so needing it. Commit ourselves to affirm and promote the principles and vision of our faith. And may we also remember that none of us does this alone. For we are a community. And in that community, we can find all that we need. In the name of all that is holy, and in all the holy names that have ever been uttered, and those still awaiting our discovery, we say, blessed be, and amen. I would like to share a somewhat whimsical reading with you, because we need whimsy and humor. It is titled April Fools by Lisa Friedman. I have slightly adapted it. Spirit of life and love, we gather in this week often dedicated to fools and whimsy. We do not know who created April Fool's Day, but surely it was a wise soul, hardly a fool. For there are indeed days that come to us all when we are one with the trickster, delighting in the world of surprise and laughter, and it lightens our spirits. Then there are days when it feels that the joke must surely be on us. When we wonder if there are other fools like us in the world, clowns, whose smiles are not so different from their frowns. But the good news is that there are. We are all fools of a kind, and not just once a year. We have foolish hearts that dare to love, foolish minds that dare to explore, foolish spirits that dare to dream. Look around. We do not live by reason alone. We need something more. So let us pause for a moment to be grateful for the fools who live in each of us. Let us not be afraid to let them out, to laugh and fall and stand again. For we can never know what wisdom we might yet learn. I titled my reflections today, How Do We Make It Happen? How do we make it happen? How do we make what happen? To what does it refer? A few months ago, I was talking to one of my longtime friends from seminary days, someone who has lots of experience in ministry, about how to inspire people to volunteer, to be on the board, and to chair committees. My friend asked that question. Well, she said, how do we make it happen? She then answered her own question. We make things happen, for example, by asking potential volunteers, how can we make it happen? As in, what would it take to make your being on the board or committee happen? Ever since that conversation, I have found myself on many occasions asking that question, how do we make it happen? And the number of things that the word it can refer to is endless. Most recently, of course, I ask the question daily as I try to navigate my way through so many things that I never used to think about at all. Right now, though, as I record this on Friday, the third day of April, in the year 2020, when I ask the question, how do we make it happen? I mean, how do we make this church, this fellowship, this congregation work? I have already given you part of the answer to that question. We make it work through covenant, through what we promise to each other, from what we agree to do. Here is another part of the answer to how we make this community work. Underlying covenant is compassion. No compassion, no workable covenant, no fellowship. Keep in mind that basically all covenants begin with these two words, I agree. Whew. Those two words are immense in their implication. Compassion will determine whether or not this congregation survives, whether or not San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship is strong enough to come out on the other side of the coronavirus not only intact, but thriving. Without compassion, we will not grow the numbers you must have to flourish. Compassion is both a means and an end in increasing our numbers. Unitarian Universalists are out there in the world, that wider world, all over the place, waiting for our message. Our job is to find them. Just what does the word compassion mean? First of all, we might want to consider what it does not mean. It does not mean pity. It does not mean feeling sorry for people or judging them or making assumptions about them without having a clue about their circumstances. Example, assuming that those who aren't working, I don't mean right now, but before the virus, that those who aren't working are lazy, hence they want to live off government subsidies. Two good definitions for the word compassion are sympathetic consciousness of others' distress, together with a desire to alleviate it, from Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary. And this one, the deep feeling of sharing the suffering of another in the inclination to give aid or support or to show mercy. Remember that word, mercy. That one from the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language. Dictionary.com gives us a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow for another who is stricken by misfortune, accompanied by a strong desire to alleviate the suffering. The word compassion comes from Latin and Greek words meaning to suffer, undergo, or experience. But then there's that C-O-M beginning, for those of you who forgot the Latin that you learned in high school. That means with or together. And passion means any powerful or compelling emotion or feeling. But perhaps my favorite definition of passion is this last one on a list of 6. A strong or extravagant fondness, enthusiasm, or desire for anything, as in a passion for music. Generally, I have a passion for Unitarian Universalism. Compassion means to endure something with another person, to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, to feel her pain as though it were our own, and to enter generously into his point of view. The important part of the definition is that word with, to endure something with another person. What is the opposite of compassion? Well, that's not clear in any of the sources that I looked at. Indifference? That doesn't seem quite strong enough to me. The best antonym that I found was mercilessness. Mercilessness. Some synonyms are mercy, tenderness, clemency, and this one, heart. I am giving you this much detail about the word compassion because I want you to work on building up your muscle of compassion this week. Yes, that's part of your homework assignment, should you choose it. Knowing what the word entails will be an important tool for growing that muscle. We are afraid right now. Every single human, I suspect, is afraid, or should be. If you are not scared in this crisis, I think that you are possibly not being honest with yourself. Being frightened is part of the new normal. Talking about our fear is healthy. We should be afraid for everyone in the world right now. A few days ago, one of you said to me, and just broke my heart, every day I have the feeling that the world might end this month. I also have that feeling. I want to reach out to all beings and reassure them that they are not alone. Now more than ever, we need to be using our compassion muscles, figuring out daily how to exercise them at home and in the wider world. To help us do that, I want to expand on the metta meditation that Karina, our Director of Religious Education, uses with our young people here in our religious education program. These are the words: may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be filled with love. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be filled with love. May they be happy, may they be healthy, may they be filled with love. And finally, may we be happy. May we be healthy. May we be filled with love. I learned a lot about compassion when I was in seminary in the mid-90s, and then I forgot a lot of it. Or I just didn't give it much thought. Who thinks about compassion on a daily basis? Of course we're compassionate, right? We're people of faith. I was in a seminary. Why dwell on it? We are compassionate beings. That's a given, isn't it? Putting together my reflections on compassion for today, I of course was thinking of my seminary days. And one of the best teachers I had at Starr King School for the Ministry in Berkeley was Joanna Macy. Macy is well known in the Buddhist community because of the work she does to bring about social change at the grassroots level, and because of the work she does with survivors of environmental disaster, such as Chernobyl in the country of Ukraine, where she worked tirelessly for a very long time. I would like to share with you her 3 lessons in compassion using the metta meditation. Before I tell you Joanna's stories of compassion, let's look a little more closely at the first of the metta meditations, the challenge. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be filled with love. Despite my anxieties and fears, I am trying to proceed each day as if the world will survive, though it may be a very different world from the one we knew before virus days. When this pandemic began, I was mainly concerned about myself. Remember, this part of our meditation is the one where we are invited to think about I. I was not yet understanding that the compassion within me and within each one of you is endless and boundless, just waiting within us to be tapped. I did not hoard toilet paper, but I had other items that I was interested in hoarding. Chocolate, peanut butter, and paper towels come to mind. When the stock market went crazily downhill, at first I thought only of myself. You might think that sending compassion to yourself would be the easiest step in the metta meditation. Unfortunately, I believe that most of us are not compassionate toward ourselves. Yet, without first showing compassion to ourselves, we will fail to unlock our endless supply of innate compassion, thus preventing our sending that compassion out to you, they, we. Time now to return to Joanna Macy's stories as I move you through the other 3 components of the metta meditation. All 3 of her stories took place in the mid-1960s during her first visit to India. She was in that country to help the Buddhist refugees from Tibet find ways to survive. Joanna and her husband worked with the Tibetans and with Peace Corps volunteers and with many others to make crafts, to make rugs, and then teach people how to market these things. So now think of someone you love. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be filled with love. after I got past my concern for myself, I became mainly concerned about my children and my grandchildren, and then my sister and brother and their spouses, and my daughter-in-law and my son-in-law, and then dear friends. But I was still not yet grasping the concept that each one of us has endless reservoirs of compassion, more than enough to extend beyond our immediate circles. So here's that first of Macy's lessons in compassion, one that I think requires the most imagination and patience for our Western minds to begin to grasp. In this story, you and you and you and you and you and everyone was once my mother. Joanna Macy overheard one of her children's teachers. She and her husband were there in China with, in Tibet, with their young children. So she once heard one of her children's teachers, an English-speaking Buddhist nun, say, quote, "So countless are all sentient beings, and so many their births throughout time, that each, at some point, was your mother." If you can't even begin to grasp some of this concept, then you will have a very good tool for practicing the art of compassion. View each person you encounter as having been your mother in a former life. On the day that Macy is telling us about, she recalls that she was a little skeptical about this, but she toyed with the idea while walking down a mountain on a narrow, winding road. Her mind was boggled by what that Tibetan nun had said, but, as Joanna puts it, the intent of this quaint practice, for all of its far-fetched fantasy, was touching, even though she, Macy, felt that she would have little use for it, because reincarnation was not part of her belief system. Plus, as most of us are, Joanna Macy was born and raised in Western culture, completely steeped in our concept of the individual. As she describes what happens next, I couldn't help but think of one of my favorite children's stories, speaking for myself now. Are You My Mother? Some of you may know it. Macy tried imagining that the next person she saw had been her mother in another lifetime. And that person was, and remember she wrote this a long time ago, so I'm going to use her words. That person was a coolie, even though I suspect that's not a good word to use anymore. A coolie in that part of the world where Macy was meant a load-bearing laborer. So there was this person carrying a very large log, the trunk of a cedar. He stopped to rest. Macy did a tentative namaste, and she waited to see his face, but she couldn't. This is what she writes. What happened? The social scientist part of me disappeared. Instead of seeing him as someone in the oppressed class and criticizing the economic system that forced him into this heavy, back-breaking labor, she saw him as a distinct, irreplaceable, and incomparably precious being. As she put it, my mother, my child. She was besieged by 1,000 questions. Where was he headed? When would he reach home? Would there be loved ones to greet him and a good meal to eat? Was there rest in store for him, and songs maybe, and embraces? I had done nothing to change his life, she continues, but the furnishings of my mind had been rearranged, my heart broken open. How odd, I thought, that I did not need to believe in reincarnation for that to happen. End of First Joanna story. So back to my personal evolving stages of compassion. I next became concerned about they. This is the component where we are invited to think of someone we have had trouble with. May they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be filled with love. There are many people with whom I have had trouble, some of whom I don't even know their names. I realized that the compassion that I hold within me is deep and wide enough to extend to the people I clash with and to those I don't even know, but whom I instinctively dislike, mistrust, feel conflicted about, less than compassionate towards. I am thinking of the people I encountered in a Georgetown, Texas park yesterday who wouldn't move on a narrow bridge and denied the whole thing, the whole virus thing, said it was a hoax, and if I wanted to stay 6 feet away from people, I should just stay home. Well, I probably won't go back to that park. It's not as bad as the polio virus, I heard a couple of people say in passing. I'm also thinking about the people in Louisiana still having live funeral services and planning to hold actual church services on Easter Sunday. I try to send compassion to them. They are probably as frightened as I am, perhaps as confused, whether consciously or not, as I am. And that brings me to Joanna's second story, in which mercy plays a part. In order to help the Tibetans, she writes, I wanted to tell their story to the world. A story I was just beginning to discover. Remember, this is in the 1960s in India. I had stunning photos of the Tibetans in exile, of their faces and crafts, and the majestic Lama dances of their heritage. I envisioned an illustrated article for a popular periodical like National Geographic. In order to hook Western sympathies and enlist Western support, such an article, I figured, should include the horrors from which these refugees had escaped. Stories of appalling inhumanity and torture on the part of the Chinese occupation had come to me only peripherally, in snatches from lay people and from other Westerners. The Rinpoches, the lineage that the Dalai Lama comes from, the Rinpoches themselves were reluctant to describe or discuss them. I presented my argument to Shoyel Rinpoche, who's a friend of Joanna Macy's, the most accessible and the most confiding of the tulkas. Tulkas are the priests. He had been a mature 13-year-old when the soldiers attacked his monastery, and he had his own memories of what they had done to his monks and lamas. Still, I knew that such accounts would arrest the attentions of Western readers and rally support for the Tibetan cause. Only when I convinced Shoyel that sharing these memories with the Western public would aid the plight of Tibetan refugees did he begin to disclose some of what he had seen and suffered at the hands of the Chinese before his flight from Tibet. The stories came in snatches of conversations as we paused outside the new craft productions center or walked over to the monastery or to temporary rented quarters. Only then did he divulge some of what had occurred. Many of his revelations, the forms of intimidation, coercion, and torture employed, have become public knowledge by now, although reports from Amnesty International and the International Council of Jurists may not have the heart-churning immediacy of Shoyel's words. The lesson I learned, however, and that will stay forever with me, is not about the human capacity for cruelty. I was standing with Schlegel under a rhododendron tree. He had just divulged what must have been the most painful of his memories, what the Chinese military had done to his monks in the great prayer hall, as his teachers had him on the mountainside above the monastery, hiding him. I gasped with shock, and I breathed hard to contain the grief and anger that arose in me. Then I was stilled by the look he turned on me, with eyes that shone with unshed tears. "Poor Chinese," he murmured. "Poor Chinese." With a shudder of acknowledgement, I realized that the tears in his eyes were not for himself, or for his monks, or for his once great monastery. Those tears were for the destroyers themselves. "Poor Chinese," he said. "They make such bad karma for themselves." I cannot emulate that reach of compassion, Macy writes, but I have seen it. I have recognized it. I know now that it is within our human capacity. And that changes for me the face of life. And now we come to our last challenge. Think of the whole world, in which I include all beings. May we be happy. May we be healthy. May we be filled with love, because in my gut, I somehow have known almost all of my life that we, all beings everywhere, are connected in the interdependent web. So because of this level of compassion is the easiest one for me to grasp. That could partly be because the object of compassion at this level is more vague. I, you, they are objects that are in my face, hard to ignore most of the time because I can identify a specific person in these instances. Here is Joanna's last story about lessons in compassion, in which we discover the importance of humor to compassion. She writes, "It was one of the many tea times with Gabriel Rinpoche, the head of the refugee community from Ingham, and two of his younger tolkas, or incarnate lamas, when we were devising plans for their craft production center. As usual, Kamtul Rinpoche had a stretched canvas propped and to his side, on which, with his customary affable equanimity, these people have just been driven out of their homes, he would be pausing as we drank our tea to paint. I, as usual, was not painting, no. I was seized by urgency to push through plans for the craft cooperative and requests for grants. I could not know then that this work would eventuate in the monastic settlement of Tashijong. On this particular afternoon, a fly fell into my tea. This was, of course, a minor occurrence. After a year in India, I considered myself to be unperturbed by insects, be they ants in the sugar bin, spiders in the cupboard, and even scorpions in my shoes in the morning. Still, as I lifted my cup, I must have registered by my facial expression or small grunt the presence of the fly. Schlegel Rinpoche, the 18-year-old Tolka who was already becoming my friend for life, leaned forward in sympathy and consternation. "What is the matter?" "Oh, nothing," I said. "It's nothing, just a fly." In my tea, I laughed heartily and like for him to convey my acceptance and composure. I did not want him to suppose that mere insects were a problem for me. After all, I was an experienced traveler in India, relatively free of Western phobias and attachments to modern conveniences and sanitation. Schlegel crooned softly in apparent commiseration with my plight. Oh, a fly in the tea. "It's no problem," I reiterated, just smiling at him reassuringly, but he continued to focus great concern on my cup. Rising from his chair, he leaned over and inserted his finger into my cup. Okay, with great ease, he lifted out the offending fly and then he exited from the room. The conversation at the table resumed. I was eager to secure Rinpoche's agreement on plans to secure the high-altitude wool he desired for the carpet productions. When Shogel Rinpoche re-entered the cottage, he was beaming. "He is going to be all right," he told me quietly. He explained how he had placed the fly on the leaf of a branch by the door where his wings could dry, and the fly was still alive because he began fanning his wings, and we could comfortably expect him to take flight soon. This is what I remember of that afternoon, Macy concludes. Not the agreements we reached or plans we devised, but Shogyal's report that the fly would live. And I recall, too, the laughter in my heart. I could not, truth to tell, share Shogyal's dimensions of compassion. But the pleasure in his face revealed how much I was missing by not extending my self-concern to all beings, even to flies. The very notion that it was possible gave me boundless delight. Another wise person who has been a teacher of compassion to me is Karen Armstrong. And I'm going to no doubt talk about Karen Armstrong at a different time. She has been called the most important theologian of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Her writing continually helps me build up my compassion muscles. Karen Armstrong and others have written a Charter for Compassion, all one word, .org. You might want to read and perhaps sign it as part of your homework assignment. I will end my remarks with two amazing statements about compassion, written by Karen Armstrong, who believes that the instinct to practice compassion is universal, and that the desire to be compassionate is as old as human nature. Armstrong makes these pronouncements based on her years of research and her lifelong study of faith traditions. Here are the two statements that are, to me, mind-boggling. Compassion is natural to human beings. More than that, compassion is the fulfillment of human nature. Think about that. The possibility that compassion is not only natural to humans, but beyond that, compassion is the fulfillment of human nature. This is how we teach and model compassion. This is what people need to know about Unitarian Universalism, that we are doing this, or trying to. Compassion is one of our most important tools for getting to the other side of the coronavirus, to that new normality. This is how we will make it happen. we extinguish this light, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. May you find some moments of compassion in the coming week. May you treat yourself compassionately. May you view others with deep compassion, whether you are viewing them face to face or from afar. May you give away some compassion. You have an endless supply. Go in peace, cultivate compassion, and remember these words of the poet Mary Oliver in her poem of the One World. This morning, the beautiful white heron was floating along above the water, and then into the sky of this, the one world we all belong to, where everything, sooner or later, is a part of everything else. Which thought made me feel, for a little while, quite beautiful myself. Amen. Blessed be safe.